There's a moment you know well. Someone you were genuinely into a few weeks ago texts you, and you look at their name on the screen and feel nothing. Not annoyance, not relief, just a quiet flatness where the pole used to be. Nothing happened. They didn't do anything wrong. That's what makes it strange. You've watched this play out before. The person who fascinated you becomes the person you're slowly, silently drifting from. And you can't point to a single reason why. Most people call it being fickle or commitment issues. But watch the pattern closely and something else shows up. The interest doesn't fade because they became less interesting. It fades the moment they became reachable. You were never chasing the person. You were chasing something the distance was protecting. And what happens the second that distance closes? That's the part worth understanding. It shows up sharpest not when someone texts you, but when the evening actually went well. There's an evening you probably remember, even if you've never told anyone about it. The date was going well. The conversation had that easy rhythm where nobody's reaching. They leaned in, they got real, they became a person instead of a profile. And it was good. And somewhere in the middle of it going right, you felt it start to drain. Nothing was wrong. That's what made it strange. They were doing everything you'd said you wanted. And part of you was already quietly working out how early you could leave without being rude. You smiled. You stayed present enough, but the pull was gone. And you spent the last hour of a good night performing an interest you'd had for real just 90 minutes earlier. Here's the part worth slowing down on. It didn't fade because they got boring. It faded the moment they got close. Watch that timing because it repeats. The interest doesn't drop when someone disappoints you. It drops when someone reaches you. Most people assume they're just picky, hard to impress, waiting for the one who finally holds their attention. But picky people lose interest when someone falls short. You lose it exactly when someone arrives. And if you've spent years wondering why you can't just stay interested in a good thing, this is where it starts. The first time, you can explain it away. That person really did turn out to be less than they seemed. The spark really did just die on its own. One instance always comes with a reason that makes it their fault, not yours. But it isn't one instance. It's the friendship that cooled the second it got easy. The pursuit you dropped the moment it was finally yours. The person who became fascinating again, genuinely, achingly fascinating, only after they'd stopped being available. Different people, different years, same shape. Here's the tell. The interest doesn't track how good they are. It tracks how close they've gotten. If it were really about them, the people would have something in common, some shared flaw that keeps disappointing you, but they don't. They're wildly different humans, and the only thing they share is the moment you cooled, the moment you had them. That's the part that doesn't fit the story you've been telling yourself. And it costs you something you don't say out loud. You've started to wonder if something in you is just broken, some missing part that lets other people stay warm while you keep going cold for no reason you can name. There's a reason the chase feels more alive than the catch. Your reward system was built to fire hardest during pursuit, not arrival. The wanting lights you up. And the moment the thing is yours, the signal quietly falls off. Everyone has this. In you, it just runs sharper, and it runs on people. But leave it there, and you'd miss the strangest part. Because if the interest died the moment someone got close, not before, not after, but exactly there, then the fade isn't really a loss of feeling. It's doing something. The losing interest is for something. And that changes the whole question. You've called yourself cold for this. Shallow, emotionally unavailable. You've collected the words other people used when they left confused, and you've quietly agreed with them. Set those down for a second, because they describe what it looks like, not what it is. Watch what actually happens the moment someone gets close. You don't stop feeling, you start building an exit. A quiet door installed at the back of the room, the instant the room starts to feel like it could hold you. The losing interest isn't the absence of feeling. It's the defense against it. There's a name for the mechanism: idealization and devaluation. The mind inflating someone while they're at a safe distance, then deflating them the moment they draw near. Not because they changed, because proximity itself pulled the trigger. You'll catch yourself doing it if you look. Someone is kind to you, really kind, the kind you'd have wanted a week ago. And within the hour, you're mentally listing what's wrong with them, building the case. They're a little too eager. They laughed at something that wasn't funny. It was never going to work anyway. An hour ago, you couldn't stop thinking about them. Now, you're assembling the reasons they were never that special. You're not being honest with yourself in that moment. You're being defended. That case you build isn't discernment. It's a locksmith working fast because someone got close enough to matter, and mattering is the thing you learned to fear. So the coldness was never coldness. It was never that you couldn't feel. It was that you could. And something in you decided a long time ago that feeling it was the dangerous part. The question is where a person decides that. Because nobody comes into the world afraid of being loved. You learned it early, in the place where you first learned what people cost. Not always a cruel place, sometimes just an unreliable one. A home where love came with conditions you couldn't always predict. Warmth that could be there on Tuesday and gone on Wednesday, for reasons no child could map. Attention you had to earn, that vanished the moment you stopped performing for it. Picture a small child reaching for someone, not asking for much, just to be met. And the reach lands on nothing. Or it's met and then pulled back. And the child feels the specific cold of having needed someone who wasn't there for it. A child only needs that a few times to draw a conclusion. And the conclusion was quiet and precise. Wanting people is where you get hurt. So they found the safest place to stand. Not far away, they still needed the warmth. Just outside reach. Close enough to be fed, far enough not to be caught needing. That's the position you still take. You learned it at 6. You're still standing in it at 35. This has a name too. Avoidant attachment. And the strange, clever thing the nervous system does underneath it, deactivating. It learns to switch off the need for closeness before closeness can disappoint it. It turns the wanting down at the source, so the drop never comes as a surprise. That flatness you feel when someone gets close, that sudden nothing where there should be something, that isn't you having no feelings. That's a system reaching in and turning the feeling off, right on schedule, exactly as it was trained to. In the home you learned it in, that was genius. It protected a real child from a real and repeating disappointment, which is what makes it so hard to see now. Because that same switch is still flipping. It flips on people who never disappointed you, people who showed up, who stayed, who did nothing but get close. The defense can't tell the difference between the caregiver who left and the person in front of you now who has no intention of leaving. So it protects you from all of them equally. And the question stops being why you go cold and becomes what it's been costing you to keep this guard posted, decades after the danger walked out the door. Add it up, and there's a quiet graveyard behind you. Not people who hurt you, people who didn't. Good ones. Patient, warm, genuinely there. Left not because they failed, but because they succeeded. Because they got close. And closeness was the thing that tripped the wire. You are never short of beginnings. You've just never quite had a middle. Let one of them be specific. There was someone, steady, easy to be around, who kept choosing you without making a performance of it. Things were working. And one ordinary week, you felt the old drain start. And instead of questioning it, you obeyed it. You took a little longer to reply. You said you were tired when you weren't. When they asked if something was wrong, you said no, and you almost believed it. You told yourself you were just protecting your energy. You weren't. You were pulling the door shut while telling yourself you were only leaning against it. They felt it before you admitted it. They started matching your distance, then exceeding it. And the day they finally let go, you felt something you were ashamed of. Relief. The wire went slack. The threat was gone. You'd made it out. And then, months later, in some unguarded moment, you missed them. Not the idea of them, them. And you couldn't understand how you'd walked away from something that, from here, looked a lot like the thing you keep saying you want. That's the cruelty of it. The defense that keeps disappointment out keeps everything else out with it. You self-protected your way into being alone and called it having high standards. Here's what surfaces once you can bear to look. The fade was never discernment. It was never you being too good for them. The person who kept leaving over and over before anyone could leave first, that person may have been the most afraid of being left of anyone in the room. So the next time it happens, the drain, the flatness, the interest quietly draining out of someone the moment they get close, you might read it differently. That drop isn't information about them. It's an alarm that fires on closeness, not on the person. It doesn't mean they're wrong. Very often, it means the opposite, that they got close enough to matter, and mattering is the thing that trips it. Here's the small shift, offered as a way of looking rather than a thing to do. The fade is worth getting curious about instead of obeying. When the feeling drains, you don't have to treat it as a verdict. You can treat it as a flare going up. Not proof this person is a mistake, but a sign you crossed into the range where the old fear lives. The coldness isn't truth. It's fear wearing the face of truth. You don't have to leave just because the alarm says leave. And the people who lose interest in people, you'll start to see they were rarely the ones who couldn't love. They were the ones guarding against how much they could. The coldness was never the absence of wanting. It was the shape wanting had to take, in a place where wanting someone had once been the thing that got you hurt. You went cold because you were built to feel it deeply. That was never the problem. It was only the proof. If this named something in you, the same guarded mind tends to show up in one more place, in how hard it becomes to trust closeness even when you stay, to let yourself need, to be cared for without bracing. That's the thread the next one follows.